Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Vivek, and today I'm going to be in conversation with the author and editor of this fantastic book, which I reread and finished it today, just in time for this conversation. Ib's Endless Search for Satisfaction by Roshan Ali. So we have Roshan with us. Hi, Roshan.
Hi, Vivek.
Hi.
Hi.
And we have Tarani with us, who is the editor of this book.
Hi.
So, I want to start with Tarani with a very, very basic question. What made you commission this book? How did it reach you? What made you commission it? And what went on behind the scenes, before it became this novel that it is?
Well, behind the scenes are all secrets, but well, in this case, it was just something special about the writing, like I met Roshan at, a social event. He was all nerves, and I don't think he wanted to talk to me. Actually, it was his wife who was like, she's an editor at Penguin, like, pushing him, like, come on, you should talk to her and see what she can do. She might be able to help you. And next thing you know, we were chatting, and he was all like, usual Roshan style, very, self-deprecating, no, very humble. So that's actually very appealing for editors like us, because we don't see that very often. People usually are just like, in your face. And so I said, okay, fine, whatever it is, send it. Let's see. And he sends me one of many drafts that were to come, of course. But in, I think just the first chapter that I read, I remember reading it. Actually, he sent it to me, I think soon after we met. And I remember reading it on the metro on my way to work. And, I had that 1 hour in the metro and I was reading it. And I immediately picked up my phone and I said, I texted Anushri, in fact, who's on this call, saying that I think this is like something really special. Like, I think he could be like, the next Arundhati Roy or something. And, because you don't come that you don't come across writing like that very often. It was so original, it was full of emotion, it was so raw. I mean, it was just something you don't come across. And I mean, I've been in publishing now for more than 6 years. I've read a lot of books, a lot of debut fiction, because that's something that comes pouring in. And it's just something that, so of course then I had to convince people in my team, and I was like, you guys have to read this, because it's a big punt to take, right? Like a completely unknown, like when I tried to talk about the book, they were like, oh, it sounds a bit crazy, and I was like, no, just read it. The second you all read it, you will know what I'm talking about. And sure enough, at our meeting, when we were discussing whether we should commission it or not, everyone was like, hands down, this is like the next big thing, just get it.
And rightly so, right? Roshan, I'm going to come to you. The book, when it starts and when everything is going on in the book, it's a very, so for me, what really struck me was the nameless city, the people that were nameless. Of course, Amma is mentioned, and we get to know the mother, and but more or less, people are not known by their names. There's Major, who's a friend, and parts of it. Then you tend to name some people. There's Annie, there's Mira. So why this naming and not naming? What was going on? I really want to ask you this, because more than the plot, I think I want to begin with this and then move on.
Um, I think so let me talk about the city first, because I know you
Yeah.
didn't specifically ask about that, but people have asked me why you didn't name the city.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think I felt at that time that naming the city would make it a little parochial, and I didn't want it to be a Bangalore novel. Like how you have these Bombay novels and Delhi novels, and so
Like
I didn't.
Milk Teeth.
Sorry.
Like Milk Teeth, which is a Bombay
Yeah,
novel.
yeah. So I didn't want it to be associated with one specific city, because it is a general kind of a city. It's not specific to Bangalore anyway. So I didn't want it to. I didn't want to tie it down with that label. And I think the reason the characters are all kind of nameless, maybe not nameless, but kind of how do I kind of untethered, like to the narrative. I mean, they just come and go. There's no solid connection between any of them. I think that was just a reflection of how I thought Abe views people and views the other characters in the book, which are the people in his life. They just come and go. He doesn't form strong bonds with anyone. And so, since the book is basically Abe talking, I thought that might be more appropriate than actually naming people and then trying to get into the history of those people and like flesh, as they say, flesh the characters out a lot. I didn't want to do that intentionally, because he's not the type of person who fleshes other people out. He's more trapped within himself, and they're more coincidental, I think, in his life.
So, you say that he has no attachment with anyone really in the book. And yet, at a very major junction in the book, he wants sort of the tenderness. He wants attachment from his friend. He wants people to understand. So, in that, I find it very conflicting that here's a person who doesn't give also. He doesn't give emotionally. He's a very closed person in that sense when it comes to his emotions. As many typical men that I've met over the years. So, and to expect then that from people, to put that sort of dichotomous nature of emotions in your book, how did that scene, or, that those couple of scenes that, so, and so he's always expecting in a way, but he doesn't want to give too much. How did that work for you while writing this book?
I mean, maybe I'm kind of like that in a way. So it perhaps came from me, but also the character. He's not a nice guy in that way. Like, he's not somebody who everyone wants to get along with, and he's not social, and he doesn't know. He doesn't have those that skill of having a conversation with somebody and having a long conversation with somebody, because that requires these certain things that you have to say to kind of bridge the silences and the sentences. And he's not that kind of guy, and in fact he's kind of a cruel character, especially to his family. So I think I just wanted that to come through. I didn't want him to be the kind of character who's like a functioning, wholesome person in society. So I had to make him a little bit antisocial, not interested in forming any kind of bond with anyone. And yet, and he's a human after all, so he does expect at some point to have that bond with someone, not realizing that it's probably too late for him. I mean, in terms of the book, like, if I had written his entire life, maybe at some point he could have sorted himself out, but he's pretty far gone that way emotionally.
I think that's the beauty of the book, right? Because nobody can really sort themselves out at any point in your life, or maybe at some points, but not totally over the course of anyone's life in that sense, because it's not that easy. And that when you read the book, it's reflective of that. It took you how much time to write this book? And how many drafts? Sorry, I'm just, because I want to ask the next question to Tarini, so that's why.
No, I mean, the moment I started writing it, it was a very different vision, and I mean, I didn't really have a vision, but that was about, from then till when it was over, it was about 10 years. But large parts of that time weren't really spent in actually working on the book. And the book changed so much from that moment when I started it, that it's a little difficult for me to say it took 10 years to write it. I just say it because it sounds good. It's a good mark.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Like,
in fact, it would be quite entertaining, since we're talking about entertaining the people here. It would be quite entertaining to give people a sense of just exactly the different kinds of versions of the book that you had written, because it started off somewhere and ended somewhere. So, I mean, do you want to just tell people just the crazy highs and lows of just writing that and coming to this one perfect book?
Yeah, no, I don't know what perfect. I was cringing yesterday while reading it, but apparently that's quite normal. So I'm not feeling too bad about it. But yeah, I mean, I started it without really knowing what book I wanted to write. So it's kind of started with I just read Ulysses, and I felt like I could write a Ulysses based here. And so that was the first very postmodern, okay, not postmodern, maybe modernist stream of consciousness kind of piece. And so that was the first, and then it kept changing according to what book I was reading, the style. So I mean, yeah, it went through quite a bit. There was one that was similar to Tropic of Cancer. There was one that was similar to Money by Martin Amis. So it kept changing like that throughout, depending on what I was reading. And I couldn't nail down that style that I wanted. I think the story, if you can call it a story, kind of remained the same from the beginning. There was this young man in a city who was kind of lost and trying to make his way through life. That remained, but the style, yeah, I had to. It just wasn't working, till I read The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow, and something clicked, and I thought, if I copy this guy's style, then that'll work perfectly for my for my content. So I tried copying his style, and very soon I realized that you can't really copy another writer's style, especially if the content is yours. You can't. It'll mold its way around what you want to say and what was going on in your mind. So that's what it turned out to be. It's kind of a weird hybrid between all these writers that I liked.
Yeah, you also give a subtle nod to Augie March in a portion of the book in one sentence. It's like a skip and go kind of a situation where it's just there, and if you miss it, you miss it.
Right.
So I caught on to it because that was the only literary reference that exists. Somehow. Sorry.
There are quite a few references in the book, but they're all like really small, and you won't notice them unless like you actually maybe you read that reference like a day back and it's fresh in your memory, then you probably get it. But yeah, I think the reason I did that is because my literary journey started with this modernist work like Ulysses and Eliot, and also I thought allusions were a very important part of literature. So I just included all these obscure references to books.
Did you put them in on purpose?
Yeah. I thought that would make me sound clever.
Well, it certainly did.
Sorry, go on.
No, please.
I want to ask you, so a manuscript reaches you and the author tells you that he's worked on it for 10 years. How easy or difficult is it then as an editor to sort of edit that manuscript? Are you able to let go of that thought that he's worked on it for this long, or the changes that you make? And how was the back and forth relationship like between a writer and an editor while working on a debut novel? How is it?
Well, I mean, I have to say that Roshan was very, very easy to work with. He, as you can see, he's, very open to feedback, and I felt that it was very easy to work on the book in that sense, because I think we had developed a certain rapport, and, he, I think, trusted me enough to let me, because, I mean, I made some pretty substantial changes and suggestions, which, if I was to do with any established writer, I would get pushback. And in this case, I mean, it's our job to not firstly have such emotional ties to, okay, fine, he worked on it for 10 years. I get like emails every day from people saying, I'm dying tomorrow, but if you publish my book, I will live another 10 years and stuff, so we're not that easy to sway. At the end of the day, it's about the book. But I think it was, I think, I mean, for a debut writer, some of them can be really, really touchy because obviously it's their baby. They've worked on, if someone like Roshan, you'd expect to be really, really like, you know, kind of possessive of the work because he worked on it for 10 years. I'm surprised he let me even, change a full stop. But it was actually fun because he sent me a couple of different versions and which had like really different things happening in them. Okay, it's not like they were, I mean, like, fine, okay, structurally maybe the story was similar, but there were like full sections in one which I liked, while in one I was like, okay, get rid of this 12,000 word section. So, and the fact that he was like, okay, just no questions asked, yeah, sure. Both of us kind of had that, I don't know what kind of relationship that was strong enough, I think, to just like, focus on the book. Like no egos, nothing. We wanted what was best for the book. And I'm glad that that worked out so well.
Yeah, and it shows. It shows in the book, and its treatment in a way, if you'd like to call it that. Roshan, for me, this book is so about the ordinary, the everyday living, the mundane, and maybe that's why when I was reading it for the second time, it read like it was a big book. I was like, it's only 207 odd pages. Why is it reading like it's a 400-page book? Why is it taking this time so much effort from me as a reader to turn the page? Maybe because I was thinking too much. I was mulling a lot. So when you were writing about the ordinary, because it's a very ordinary story, it's just about a man's story from point A to point B, literally, and all that happens in between. With his father, with his mother, his grandfather, his friends, his sexual experiences in a way, his interaction with the world at large. So, how do you then take something like that and transform it with your prose to make it what you want to make it at the end of the day? With all of it, with all the everyday, with all the mundane, with everything. Like, there's no excitement. He's just trying to get through life.
Yeah. I was very clear from the beginning that I wanted to write a realistic book. I mean, realism to a degree that I enjoyed, that the kind of work that I liked, and that required a mundane life, sort of. Like I think I felt like when I was writing it that if I included, say, an exciting event just to make the narrative more exciting, that's kind of a cop out for me. So I think my style, or the language that I use to describe the mundane that's just how it comes to me. I'm not, and I'm thankful for that skill that I have, to describe mundane things in an interesting way. And I think that's just my type of writing. I don't think I can do big books about lots of different, like lots of big events and world changing movements and large consequences to small actions kind of books. I don't think I can do that, that kind of
But
writing.
you've done it really well in the sense that at one point his grandfather is asking for mango juice, and then the very next sentence he's dead. And I'm like, wow. And everything that follows after that in the next couple of pages is so beautiful in the sense that he's dead. And people who haven't read the book, I'm sorry, I'm discussing it in detail, but you read the book then. And he's dead. And then suddenly the one moment of happiness in the family's entire existence from the beginning of the book is that there's money, that his father can be sent to a better hospital, that the mother can actually be free of everything. Because as a caregiver, we never focus on the mother. It's its story, really. And whenever we do focus on her, it's from his perspective, which is fair.
Yeah.
So, you do these things with the prose and the writing, which stand out magnificently in a way, because they're just exploding at the reader. Okay, I just thought it was going to be about mango juice and the old man being cranky. But yeah, sure, he's dead. Now what to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's an example of it. I wanted it to be mundane, and the grandfather dies, and there's no big mourning, and there's no big uh, kerfuffle about his death, and that's because probably because it's through Abe's eyes. Like he's not reliable narrator, and probably there was a lot of mourning and wakes held for him because he was a big, he was an important guy. So I'm sure a lot of that happened, but Ib just doesn't care about that. To him, it's just another event in his life that just happens, and then you just pass through it and try to yeah. And actually, for once, he actually looks at the positive side of something that happened, which he doesn't usually do.
While I was reading the book, I felt that there's really no age to Ib. I've never seen him as a child because he's already grown up, and because of his father's schizophrenia and everything that follows, he's never really a child. Even if he's concocting imaginary friends, or in my case, when I read it again, I was like, okay, maybe they're toys who've come to life in his brain, and all that is going on. I've never seen age as a factor again in the book, except for the grandfather, where I really felt that, okay, he's aging and now he's in the hospital and he's dying. And, that was the only time. So again, just like time, age is very fluid in the book.
Yeah. It's Abe narrating from some point in the future, and everything is molded according to his vision. So what happened in his childhood also, we don't really know if it was like that. And also, something that I realized later was that it's not, I used to describe it as a coming of age novel, but it's actually not a coming of age novel because there's nothing happens to him. There's no coming of age moment. There's no change in his character. There's no transformation that happens in the book. So his character kind of remains the same from the beginning to the end. And I mean, there is a moment there where you think something could happen, and then he can transform into maybe a better, more balanced person, but that too is shattered. So yeah, I think it's all these things. I didn't want to concretize a lot of these things like that we usually look for in books, like age and names, relationships. So these
And
things.
this whole idea of like, yeah, beginning, middle, end also, right? There is no real, it's just all kind of in this one big circle. There's
Yeah.
no, okay, now the book is going to end because he lives, happily ever after. Or,
Yeah.
there's no concept of that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love at the ending, there's the bit where his mother calls him cruel, and she says that, you're so cruel and you're going to go away now. And I love that. It's just that it's like it can take so many forms later in your head as a reader, that because you just left it so open for everyone's interpretation in a way.
Yeah.
Tarini, which is your favorite part of the book, the one that is very close to you?
Well, I think I liked his childhood probably the most, when he had all these I think the language also used in that part of the book is the most interesting, where he does like a lot of this alliteration and repetition and, these like very interesting wordplay type of things. I think that was probably my favorite, when he had his imaginary friends, and there's just like this kind of little craziness about it, which I loved because that's kind of what drew me into the book, and I think that's what stayed close to me.
Roshan, with every part that I've read, it feels like there's a different writer who's written every part. It doesn't feel like, and it's a great thing because that means there's just so many different styles in that way in this book, that that makes it so separate from each other. Each part is like a different story altogether, and yet cohesive at the end of the day. So was that intentional? Did you, when you read it, the final manuscript, did that jump at you in any way, or was that intentional from the very beginning?
Not intentional at all. I think it was just a byproduct of it having taken so much time, that I think I grew as a writer as I wrote it. And also my circumstances changed. The first few, I think in the beginning, when I started writing the book, I was kind of not in a very great place. And so that the kind of writing that came out of there, I couldn't replicate that style later on. Not style, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't replicate the way that was written, I think, in a way. So I think you take so long to write a book, and after a while you kind of you forget you forget what the first few chapters are like. And but yeah, I never saw it as a negative thing. It was just something that happened while I was working on the book.
You know, sorry, religion, God, faith, whatever you like to call it, plays a major role in the book. It's throughout, right? I mean, loss of it also, and sometimes trying so hard to believe in something. So, because I've read a lot of books where it's very difficult to talk about these things, especially novels. And because you're supposed to be this literary, so you're supposed to sort of detach yourself from topics about, religion or faith or godliness, or even the entire sadhu angle and all of it that is there in the book. How did you write about these things? I mean, are you religious at all? Are you an atheist? How does it work? How do your beliefs then come in to the book with the characters' beliefs? Is it a reflection or not?
Yeah, no, I think all the people who know me who are on this call, when you said, "Are you religious?" I think they all.
I think even I would have laughed and smirked a bit.
Yeah, so no, that's a nice, I think, nice aspect of the book talk about. I think if there was one thing that I wanted to write about, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't really have anything I wanted to write about, but I think religion was one thing I wanted to write about, and more specifically to kind of debunk, rail against. Yeah. So that was something that I've always wanted to do, and any opportunity I get, I do it now too. So I think that was one very powerful motivation for me while writing this book, to have religion as an aspect of the character's life, and the character doing his best to I guess criticize it, um, and which is generally, I think, quite an important thing to do in life. Uh, so if you want to take a social message from my book, take that.
It's just some scenes from the book are so striking. The fact that those boys are standing, and the way Rohit behaves with a beggar, or with someone who's just a loafer in that sense, or when Ib goes to his grandfather's house after his death, and he sees all these things, and the room seems smaller, the house seems smaller, and the piano where he's playing this tune, and all of it, and also especially the entire journey to the cave, and where he feels the cold air from the window, and people are sleeping and he's the only one who's awake. So I think these scenes make the book sort of, in a way, emotional, according to me, though we feel that perhaps there's no hint of it, or there's so much melancholia, is written in a certain way, but still it's so heartening to even read all this. Though it perhaps doesn't come from a place of it being heartwarming or heartening, but one can interpret it anyway. So
Yeah.
how did you then, talk about this? Because again, death, right? When you enter a house where someone used to stay and nobody is there now, not even the beagle, how did that, fit itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I used to at least think a lot about death as a phenomenon. Um, so I always felt it was what was striking about death was uh, how the contrast between the person as a living thing and the person who is dead. Every single thing about them is just ended. There's nothing lingering. Um, so, and I mean, the only thing that is left behind are the objects that you possessed when you were, and obviously memories. But he doesn't have those kind of memories of his grandfather, and there's nobody around to talk about the memories that they have. So I always found that contrast really interesting, of the suddenness of it, how absolute death is. It's one of the few things that is that black and white, I think, in our lives. So yeah, I found that interesting, and it's nice. It's interesting to see how, as I said in the book, that somebody who in life uh, was such a presence, and then suddenly, just like anybody else, is just complete absence, just gone. I mean, it doesn't matter how big you are in life, how important you are, but you will die, and you die the same way. And even in the hospital, I think I say something about why there's no like background music of hymns and chants and for this great man who's dying, but nothing like that ever happens. It's just die.
You die and people buy vegetables and haggle over underwear.
Yeah,
Another one of my favorite parts of the book. So
I like that line.
yeah, I'm going to leave it open to people who are here to ask you questions, to ask you and Tarani questions. So guys, if you have any questions for Roshan and Tarani, please, I'll unmute you, and then you can even show yourselves on video if you'd like to. And
I think Zoom has that feature where you can raise your hand.
yeah, you can raise your hand.
I've always waited for a moment where someone can use that. This is perfect.
Zoom newbie, no, I'm telling you, this is just
Somebody's
only on Instagram. Somebody wants
Has someone raised? Oh yeah.
Okay, I can't.
Aruni has said,
Harini.
what are you working on now?
Aruni is.
Okay, thanks Aruni for the question. I am working on a new novel, which is kind of a comic novel about kind of a journey comic novel, I guess, like a road trip comic novel about. I mean, I actually can't really say what it's about because it might change, but yeah, it's very different from this. Although
let it take another 10 years.
No, please. No. No more 10 years. Come on.
It's kind of I mean, it's very different from this book, obviously, but I find sometimes that despite my best efforts, the character kind of is turning out like Ib in some ways. I'm trying very hard to work against that, but it happens sometimes. But yeah, it's a comic novel, like I guess. Yeah, actually, I don't want to talk about it because then it'll give you like a.
It'll be interesting to see an Ib-like character from such kind of melancholia to comedy.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not like it's dark comedy.
Okay, yeah. I figured. I don't think you could. I was wondering where is Roshan getting the sudden comic side.
No, I'm very funny, but it's just I don't want to write that kind.
It sounds really interesting. Yes, Aruni, it does sound interesting. Guys, any other question for Roshan and Tarani?
I've got one from Anushri.
Yeah.
Which is, who from Bollywood/Hollywood would you cast as the main characters in Ib if it were to be adapted?
A very good question. I quite like it, though I find it a little cheesy, but I love it.
Yeah. This is the entertaining stuff.
Yeah, completely.
Bollywood, I'm really bad at Bollywood. I don't watch much because forget the reasons, but I just I don't watch much of it. Hollywood.
I think the guy from Sex Education, the teenager there. I like that guy a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know his name, but you tell us your choice.
Yeah, I've never thought about this, honestly. I just don't know. Maybe the guy who plays Meriadoc Took in Lord of the Rings, but in a dark role.
Wow.
You know, the Merry and Pippin, the
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
not Pippin, he's a little funnier, but Merry, he's got a very he's got an interesting face, I think. He might be a sad character. Well,
You know, I also was thinking about while reading it, somehow I thought this would be the younger Agastya from English August. I don't know why. Uh,
yeah,
my mind kept going there. And then couple of years when he's in his 30s, he's an IAS officer in that place.
yeah.
So it could be that
So
from
like
everything that
disillusioned with the world.
yeah.
Somebody has a question.
Oh, yeah. Would you, by any stretch of imagination, call your book as a philosophical fiction? If yes, is there any fundamental meaning to Ib's searching? I'm yet to read this book, but this question popped in my mind, hearing you all talk.
I guess it is philosophical in a way. I mean, it does talk a lot about life and meaning, and uh, yeah, I think he is quite a philosophical character. I think he questions the meaning of things a lot, uh, how we know things, and how, and the religion aspect of it also, what society means. There is no fundamental meaning to Ib's search, definitely not. In fact, quite the opposite. He doesn't know if he doesn't know that, I don't know if he's searching for something. He doesn't know that he's searching for something. He's just going about his life
So
in,
it's an endless search.
yeah, it's endless. Yeah, exactly what the title says.
That's just the author's thing. That, you know, maybe Ib is not searching for anything, but let it be there in the title nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that too endless. I loved it. I love the title. So,
Tarini, you give her the credit for that, because I just
and I
sent
love the choice of the word endless. You know, it could be eternal, it could be a lot of things, but I'm glad that it's endless.
yeah, I thought of eternal, but it seemed a little trite. Eternal.
Yeah, you know, Roshan's writing is so like to the point, and he's
Yeah.
like no nonsense. It's like endless, you know. No, he didn't know like flowery stuff, no eternal and all for him.
Yeah, it's just like almost he's showing you a mirror and he's like, whether you like it or not, look at
Yeah.
the ugly, look at the melancholic, look at the routine, look at the sad, and deal with it. And if you can't deal with it, even that's all right. So,
Yeah.
Sibi is asking you, is Ib anyone you know?
Kind of. I mean, there was a point in my life I was kind of like him. Not anymore, thankfully, but there was a point where I was similar to him. So I guess me,
Sorry.
long time back.
Neeraj says, if you were to change something from the book at this point of time, what would it be?
Oh my God, how much
No, nothing. You can't change now.
time do we have?
Yeah, we have another 7 minutes. Go on.
No, I think um, I don't know. Like there's a part in the last quarter of it uh, that I feel like I should have done it again. It felt a bit like I didn't obsess over it enough.
And which part is this?
I think the last quarter or so of the book.
I don't think I would change anything from that bit actually.
Yeah,
It's most beautifully written because see, there's no closure, there's nothing. It's just so I love the fact that there's some kind of homecoming, and
right.
you know you see your father in your room and
Yeah.
you know having a imaginary conversation with Mother Teresa. It's just brilliant. I just love the way it is. It's just so perfect.
Maybe it's the style. I think I maybe
Yeah.
didn't put enough effort into stylizing it that much.
That's but most writers would say that
Yeah,
about their books. But,
possibly.
Tarini, there's a question for you from Aranya. For someone with a completed manuscript, how do you suggest to approach editors? Should one be looking for representation by literary agents or directly reach out to publishers? How it better works in Indian literary dynamics? Aranya, before Tarini answers this, get your better half, friend, or spouse, or whoever to go approach editors. Or
What?
push you to approach
Oh,
editors.
acha, like
Or push you to approach
yeah,
editors.
yeah, yeah. No, I think yeah, everyone needs that kind of support, I would say, and also you know, extra push from people they love.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you don't necessarily need a literary agent. If you would like to go through one, please by all means reach out to them. It might help in just, shaping your work, shaping your pitch. They might be able to help you reach out to people better. Otherwise, you can just go on any of our websites of all the publishing houses. We have a very detailed, how to submit your manuscript. And honestly, like, we all go through that submissions ID where these books come in. So if you have something really good to send us, we will find it and we will get in touch with you. So it's all very detailed and written on our website. So you can take a look there.
Thanks, Tarini. Thank you so much. Roshan, another question for you. I'm yet to read the book from Naresh. Just curious how much you try to control the plot versus letting the character grow on his own.
I think for this book, there's no real plot. It was just the character driving the narrative. And I suspect that even my future books will probably be the character driving the narrative rather than me coming up with a plot and then trying to insert the characters into that. It's just not the kind of writing that I think I'll ever do. Although I really envy the people who can do that. I think it'll make life much easier.
Yeah, so do I. I envy people who have so much clarity as to what they want to do with their book. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's like, how did this happen to them and not to me when I sat down to write anything?
Yeah, I have authors who have Excel sheets and they just like have everything charted out. And they know exactly how much each chapter, the length should be, and accordingly they'll write. And it's like,
wow.
Yeah.
They actually look at so much in detail about each chapter, how many words. Or...
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it. Everyone has their own process.
No, so sure. I'm just amazed. I'm really amazed by it. It takes a lot to be able to.
And to stick to it.
Yeah.
I got one more question from Anushri.
Sure.
What books were you reading when you were writing Ib?
I was reading, let me tell you, I actually made a note of this in case somebody asked. Somebody asked me.
Very well prepared.
So James Joyce, and then poetry by Philip Larkin and Eliot, and Emily Dickinson. And I think I read The Midnight Children sometime in between there. Martin Amis, couple of his books, and Saul Bellow. I think I read maybe three of his books. Also Nabokov. I read Lolita and which one did I read? I think Pnin, and a couple of others. Henry Miller. Not many Indian authors because I think it was a professional envy maybe that I felt like if I read something good that was similar to my book in content, then I would be discouraged. So I avoided Indian authors.
At some point, didn't you want to write an anti-Midnight's Children?
Yeah. So that was, I think that's still there in the book.
It is. I was just telling you the other day, right?
Yeah. So I think that was the idea of not writing a book with these with a grandiose kind of a theme, like a continent finding its voice type of book. I didn't want to write that kind of. And I was just having some fun. I obviously don't really want to write an anti-Midnight Children. But
I would love to read that. I would love to see how that works out. Whoever is writing it or wants to write it.
Yeah.
Only because at some points the book is insufferable. But yeah, moving on. But I can't believe I said that on camera, but I did.
And it's recording also.
Let it be. It's going to go up on YouTube also.
Amazing.
But you know what? We have 1 minute to go. So if there are no more questions from people, thank you to the both of you for making this conversation so enriching and so insightful. Sorry, Roshan, I can't hear you.
No, I was just saying thank you for making this happen.
No,
Long
thank you. Long pending. And for people who haven't read the book, please go pick it up. Available at every bookstore.
hopefully.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm sure. Listen, it was shortlisted for JCB 2019. So please go pick it up. And you know what? It's a brilliantly written book. It's fantastic and all sorts of wonderful. So please read it. And thank you so much, Tarini. Thank you so much, Roshan.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys, for joining here. And I'm
Yes.
going to put this up on YouTube. So if you ever want to watch it again, feel free to. Bye, guys. See
Bye.
you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye, Roshan.
Bye.
Bye, Tarini.